Welcome to the Staff and Trenchcoat. I'm Raymond Magdallan here, as always, with Pope Jupiter.
Hello.
Today, we're going to be talking about the Silverblood Promise by James Logan. And this was my pick, so you get the first crack at it.
Yeah, I think it's funny that the title is name dropped pretty early, and it's stated that a silver blood promise is a weaker promise, a lesser promise than the gold blood promise that he's supposed to make. And yeah, that kind of is this book. This was just a nothing book. It definitely had some stuff we're going to get into about some bad things in it. But ultimately, it was just kind of a Wheel of Time esque fantasy.
You
Paint
want
by
to take
numbers.
another stab at that?
I was trying to be like it's like a generic, but it's not really a generic fantasy. It's got a lot of that Wheel of Time, Game of Thrones DNA in there. But
No. No, it doesn't. This was one of the laziest, fluffed up novels that I can remember reading. This was worse than Way of Kings in terms of how much of the stuff on the page was just recycled shit
yeah,
and restating. I guess here we go. It's petty time. Magdallan's mad. Uh, I've said it a bunch of times on the show. The thing I hate more than almost anything else in a narrative is when you do something where the character does something on the page and then they think about the thing they just did and then
yeah,
they tell somebody else about the thing they just thought about that you just showed me that they did.
yeah,
It does it over and over and over and over throughout the entire text.
yeah.
I would say a full 30% of the words on the page of this novel are just him telling the same three stories over and over to different people, and then they
Mm-hmm.
go, "That's a ridiculous story,
Yeah.
but I guess I believe you."
I think
That's the novel.
I think it was when I was finishing it this morning, or maybe I was listening to it a little bit last night. But there's a point where he like kind of finishes the story about the duel, where he talks about how about the after effects and how the family of the kid he killed was wealthy and powerful enough to get him to drain the rest of their money and make him a pariah. And it just felt so unnecessary because we already knew all that.
Yes, and it just every time even the most mundane of like sub characters gets introduced, tell me your story. And then here he goes. He's gonna rehash it, and occasionally, in a moment of mercy, the author will just tell us, and then I told him my story, and then gives us a page break,
Yeah.
line break, whatever, and leaves most of the actual words out. But over and over and over again. I mean, particularly the about the fact of his mother's death making
Mm-hmm.
his father more distant, and the
Blood on cherry blossoms.
yes, and the murder of his father. But then as the book goes on, it introduces more things for them to repeat to each other over
Mm-hmm.
and over and over. There's the murder of and names are another thing. I can't remember anybody's name
No.
in this because they're all just weird names. And this is just a Brit.
Yeah.
And so it's not as though he's like a non-native English speaker or something.
Right.
And it's not that the names are clearly from some specific linguistic background that's weird. It's just they're all kind of uh, mealy mouthed names. And then later on in the book, suddenly we get Jessica and Clara
Yeah.
next to everything else. And of course, the only two characters that have normal names are the whores.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, there's Flea, Jessica, and Clara, the poor people in the story.
the pores, yes.
Which is funny because, like, if I had to assign a lot of the names seem to be that kind of like Saxon, like
Yeah, I could see that.
that kind of like I don't want to say Old English because it's not Old English, it's pre-English type names, and but not like Latin or Roman or anything like that. So yeah, the names are Like, I remember Lucan, obviously, because he's the main character. Flea, because I stand by she is the one redeemable character in the book. And
Sandrosa.
Sandrosa, and then Ashra.
Right.
Matic?
Murillo?
Marilla was the red herring.
Well, wasn't there a Marilla and then another name that was very close to
Yeah, it was like
Marilla?
Meridic or something
yeah,
like
something
that.
like that.
Yeah, it's...
Well, so there's... In a nutshell, the plot line is... Guy has a bad relationship with his dad. His dad gets murdered. We think we're going on a murder mystery. But then it becomes a murder mystery within a murder mystery within a murder mystery.
I just realized they never actually solved his dad's murder, right?
No, I don't think
we never got an answer. His dad sent him to the city. He gets involved in all this to meet this woman because she
Sandrosa.
Sandrosa, because she has a casket for him. Which spoilers, the casket is 1000% just a sequel hook. It is literally just oh, this is interesting. I guess we'll have to find out what this is about. The end.
Yeah. So he goes to the new city, and then he has to tell a bunch of different people why he's there. But then you have the intrigue of Sandrosa being framed. So he has to go and get information about that, wherein he has to tell his story over and over to Obasa, and so on and so forth. And then he has to go and tell his story to Sandrosa, who's in a cell. She gives him more information, and then he goes to try and figure out who actually murdered the person who she was framed for. And in doing so, he has to then tell his story and her story to all these different people. But then the doctor, who has the information himself, gets murdered with a journal, and they take his journal. So then they have to tell a bunch of people his story, and then Sandrosa's story, and then the information from Sandrosa, and then about the doctor. And then he gets captured by the king, the twice crowned king, who is the underlord boss. And then he meets the Lady of Midnight, and has to tell her his story and Sandrosa's story and the information he got from her and about the murder of the doctor, so on and so forth. And she agrees to help him. But then suddenly we get the introduction of the mythical blade.
Right. And well, I will push back a little bit. There was a mention of the blade early on in the story.
It's teased early.
But yeah, it's very much in hindsight, a Chekhov's blade. Like it is conspicuous by its being mentioned, and that shows its importance. Like, I feel like a better author would have mentioned it along with other artifacts that have been stolen or something like that. Whereas in this case, we just kind of got a mention of it, and then it turned out to be like the most important MacGuffin in the book.
I feel like at some juncture, James Logan, the author, had someone say to him the cliche writing rule of show, don't tell, and he took that personally.
Mm-hmm.
And he thought, I'm going to get published to Tor, and I'm going to do it. I'm going to fucking tell. I'm telling everything for 300 or 500 pages. I'm telling. There's no showing. It's all tell.
And speaking of telling, we have the rare, I already mentioned this to you, but the rare male version of the I'm a badass. You got to believe me.
Well, Lucan is a nothing character. And his personality is completely fluid.
Yeah.
And there are some general adjectives we could use: arrogant, self-assured, troubled, sarcastic maybe. But there's no defining element that runs through the text, and he's not changing.
No.
He's just poorly defined.
Right.
It's just not a well-written character. I'm not interested in him. I don't care. I'm not able to see myself in the character. I'm not invested in his...
And his investiture in the... I don't know, maybe they need... I guess this is just kind of part of the shallowness of the novel, because it seemed like he got there and he talked to Savrona, or whatever the fuck her name was.
Sandrosa?
Sandrosa.
That's when he breaks into the Ebon Hand.
Yeah. And it was the Ebon Hand, like the ship from KOTOR.
Yeah. Well, and the cheese factor was really high too.
Yeah.
Everything is wolves and so on and so forth, and some of the mercenaries are just named after precious jewels.
Yeah.
And just lots of stuff that I thought Tor was the great filter.
Yeah.
And I mean, we have this on our bullet list, but I mean, now's as good a time as any. I can't fucking believe that Tor published this book. Does it deserve to be published? Sure. But I would have thought, I'm stuttering out because I'm so aghast. I would have thought that given that Tor is the gold standard, it's the dream of every fantasy writer to be published by Tor, that they would just be inundated with hundreds or thousands of just really good, incisive, powerfully written, rich fantasy narratives, and that they would be able to just skim the glory off the top. Yeah. And the fact that this got through, I don't know what that means. And I mean, you had mentioned that, Tor is now a subsidiary of...
It's just an imprint of Macmillan Publishing.
And okay, fine. It might not be as eclectic and prestigious as it once was in a certain sense, but I still thought that the bar would be way, way higher,
right,
on basically every metric. The writing is generally sound,
yeah,
but I'll say this just straight up. Out of every book we've read for the entire podcast, this is the least quotable novel that we've read, and it's not even close. Like, even Knight Errant had better lines. Part-Time Monster Hunter had better lines that were more humorous, more quippy, and things that I felt were worth highlighting. I don't even think I have to pull my phone out to look at the things that I've highlighted. I know that I did take note of the fact that at some point, about 50% of the way through the novel, he discovered the word rasp and decided every scene, rasp, everything's fucking rasping.
Yeah.
The steel rasped from the sheath. He heard a sword rasp out. Someone's dagger rasped in the background.
His voice rasped out. Yeah, everywhere. Yeah.
He discovered that word and simultaneously forgot how to do Control F on his own manuscript and just fucking sent it. Rough.
Yeah.
It just unquotable, unmemorable, and I assume it's part of a series. Although this is the debut, and so I don't know if the next one has been published yet. And so like I said, I am absolutely godsmacked that this came out through Tor. And so, to reiterate again, if you happen to be listening to this and you're a writer, you can do it. It's within reach, because it's not so out of the realm of possibility as you might be imagining. That if this guy, why not you?
Right.
So I mean, let's jump in. So, violence.
There's sure a lot of fighting, a lot of blood. I don't know. This very much struck me as a paint by numbers story. Like he's the rapscallion, ne'er-do-well, outcast son of a noble. So he doesn't have very many resources to call on, but like he's got that noble upbringing, so like he can blend in with high society, but he also knows how to use a sword and da 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 da. And then something happens and he has to go to some place to do a thing. And then he goes there and he immediately meets someone who you wouldn't expect but is able to be incredibly helpful to him. And it's just this continuous, like, I've played the Dungeons and Dragons game that this story would be in, and it was boring. It was dumb and railroady, and I hated it. I didn't like it any better as a book when I didn't get to roll dice. It's just a very generic fantasy story. Interesting city, and this is kind of something that this felt like a weirdly liberal book.
Well, back up. The city was not interesting. What was interesting about the city?
Yeah, the city
I mean,
was.
I mean,
It
if
was
you're gonna,
Venice.
if
It was just Venice.
right, but I mean, if you're gonna level the, it was paint by number.
Yeah,
I mean, it's just the standard. There's an aristocracy. There's the shadowy organization that does the sentencing and carrying out
and of
of
course they're called the
punishment.
fucking Inquisition.
Right. And there were some things that were, I mean, there's the Sarlacc pit
Mm-hmm.
with the worm that comes out and
Yeah.
eats 1 out of 3 people that they
Right.
bring out, and there's an underbelly, but it's really loosely defined.
There's the Sargosan Quarter is sort of a slum slash Chinatown slash.
Yeah, and there's a little bit of world building that goes on with the transfer of a mythical lance with a neighboring city. But if I try and imagine this Sephrona, I can't. There's no. It didn't leave any image in my mind. Like if I sit here and
I just keep seeing Venice, which
I
doesn't make
didn't
any
get
sense
that.
because there's no
Yeah,
canals.
there's no canal, so I don't even know.
I,
I didn't feel that way. I didn't get that at all. I know you said it, but
I think I'm cluing in on Venice, and actually it would be more like Florence or even just Rome, because it's clearly and a lot of this is from the narrator who did a lot of Italian accents for the natives of the city.
I mean the
But
Sephrona is like an icon in a map building software that you click on and then plop onto
mhm.
a screen.
Yeah, there's not a lot of discussion that I can recall about architecture or the way things look or anything like that. It's just so a lot of honestly, a lot of it is that it just kind of reminded me, especially with the way you've got the Pontifex and the head Inquisitor, the way that's all set up. It just reminded me of like playing Assassin's Creed 2 or Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, just like going through Rome and Florence and Venice and these cities.
Yeah, and I think it would be fine to have a relatively nondescript cityscape if the entire novel is not set there and
Right.
it's not sort of a character. Like if we think back to Ember Blade or Age of Ash,
Mm-hmm.
when I think about those books, an image is brought into my mind.
Right.
When I think about this novel, there's just a void with the different names of the characters kind of floating around and almost nothing else. Drawing us back, I thought the combat was exactly of a piece with the rest of it. I
Yeah.
can't really remember much about any one
Mm-mm.
given combat scene. I mean, it's a lot of I put the knife to his throat and made him say some stuff, or
Yeah.
they pointed a crossbow at me and said like I could shoot you right now.
There's a
Yeah, but
lot.
you won't. Let me tell you this story first. Okay, I'll stand here for an hour while you tell me your story.
There's a lot of people being held at knife point and crossbow point.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And there's the whole thing with the big swim with the twice crowned king, and then we never get to see it.
No.
And that was the most interesting thing in the whole book was this. It's like an underground labyrinth filled with water and monsters that they might make you swim through, and maybe you can escape.
Going through that, I was like, okay, so this is where he's going to get a level of badass. He's going to go through the big swim or whatever, and
He's gonna make it out with just only armed with a dagger.
yeah. But no, instead he meets the mythical best thief in the city who has
Teleport rings.
yeah. Which I mean, yeah, that would be a useful thing to find, but I don't know that.
Well, he names what should be one appearance character archetypes. So the he names like every all of the most powerful men in this giant city, and the best thief, and the Obasa.
Yeah.
The number of times Obasa appears in the text is appropriate for the type of character that he is. But essentially, our main character just runs through all of these mythical level characters, just one after the other, to the point where it's like, okay, is there no one else in this city?
Maybe I misread it, misheard it, misunderstood it. My impression when Lady Midnight was first introduced was that she was a like an old legend of the city. I did not get the impression when she was first introduced that she was an active criminal in the city. I thought she was a legend. Like,
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of the way
that's the
that
way
it
it's
would be
introduced.
set up.
Yeah.
It would be like if in Star Wars, I hate to do this, but I'm gonna do it. We're going with a Star Wars
Hell yeah.
analogy here. If at the very beginning of A New Hope, they just began listing off, the Emperor and all the different Sith and all the different heads of every shadowy organization and every major potential player from the old Republic, and then in the course of that first movie, he just only meets those characters,
Right.
and you just don't see almost any regular people. So he did not fall into the trap of having all the NPCs just be NPCs. He just said, nope, there just aren't NPCs.
Yeah.
A couple times we see a crowd, but for the most part, he's just interacting with these hyper powerful.
And like the one non influential, non near mythical figure is the servant boy who just happens to know about a secret passage to the.
Well, right, but I mean, of course he does.
Yeah.
And again, I think this would be okay if you were writing an epic fantasy that was more of like a travelogue.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if the whole backdrop is this one city, there has to be more than just the most powerful people
Right.
in your story.
And more importantly, I think it's a boring story if if pretty much everyone helping you is like the most superlative in their field in the city. You've got the best city, you've got the fucking shadow broker level, whatever the fuck.
The Scrivener.
No, I was thinking of Ibasa or Obasa.
Yeah, you've got the best spy, you've got the best forger, the best thief,
Yeah.
the apparently like the best child thief.
Yeah. The best street rat.
Street rat. And then you're interacting with all the plots are these super high level.
And I think you could do that, but you need the main character to either be a complete neophyte, someone who's, barely an adult, just getting out into the world, and like to contrast, or the protagonist needs to also be some sort of mythical, legendary figure. Instead, we've got Logan, who's like, I'm all right with a blade, and I can talk my way into most women's beds, and he's just nothing. He's just a guy. He's just some guy.
Yeah, and not a very interesting guy.
No.
He's got daddy issues.
This book is the product of and showcases the confidence of mediocre white men.
It does that. It does accomplish that. And but where the Book of Doors was, Deus Ex Machina, the novel, this is story retelling, tell, don't show, the novel.
Yeah.
And it was just rough. When I finished it, I just did a sigh of relief and went to sleep.
Yeah.
I was just glad to be done with it. And I mean that fucking ending. In the cask that is left to him, there's just a fucking key for another bank vault, and so you can just imagine that book 2 is just going to be the next.
They're going to go to another city where they're going to meet the best forger, the best thief, the best information broker, the best. Yeah, it's.
I mean, over and over, people mention that Lucan is basically good at getting into trouble and then managing to get out of it.
And that's simply because he manages to just annoy people into getting him out of it. I mean,
And there are a lot of failures of promise and reward. And so at the beginning of the book, for example, the sea pirate that ferries him from one city to
mhm,
the to
Sophrona.
Sophrona threatens to put him into the water and mentions there's these shark things
Yeah,
that will get you. And then fast forward, he jumps out of a window into the same water, and there's just no mention of it.
yeah,
It's totally fine. The only part of it that's crazy is that he did it. There's no and then again with another thing is where this whole the big swim
mm-hmm,
and then we just don't get that. There were just a lot of problems, a lot of I think just failures of imagination.
yeah. And the plot within the Watsonian plot, so to speak, is that the three most powerful men in the city, well, two of the most powerful men in the city, and then one of the more influential members of the ruling council of the city, have this plan to essentially restart a race war by framing the Sargovian ambassador for the murder of the Grand Duke of Sophrona. And they do this because somehow the merchant prince has gotten into contact with these even more mythical legendary figures. And the whole book is them the first like half of the book is them learning about this plot and then the plot going off and then them trying to hold him accountable. And I'm thinking hold the merchant prince accountable. And we get to the end, and basically they manage to steal the knife in a way that if it was on an episode of Leverage, I would have called so much bullshit. If it had been an episode of fucking Burn Notice, it would have been such bullshit. The idea that I mean, I guess I can see the Seven Jewels, the leader wanting to, bargain for her nephew. Like, sure, okay, fine. It makes as much sense as anything else in this world. But then the fact that it was just fractal stupidity. The fact that the prince didn't open the chest until he he was going to present it to the faceless. It was, and then they do all this. The faceless are apparently, I don't know, Faerun fanboys.
It unclear.
Yeah, because I think they did explicitly say they weren't Faerun, but they were like searching for the great Faerun crystal and trying to reassemble it or something. Anyway, super unclear. But they managed to embed the memory of this merchant prince basically confessing to his crimes and doing all this, and it's embedded in this crystal or in the knife. It
No, they want the knife because the knife has a crystal in it that they
right,
want.
but they gave him like a token.
They
Or
gave him
something,
a little
right?
token that plays a video.
Yeah, and I'm like, you got to be fucking kidding me. There's no fucking way that would work. You'd play that for the merchant council or whatever, and they'd say,
No.
the fuck are we supposed to do with this?
Yeah, what do I do with this?
We're already going to
But
war.
there was the one guy that got left alive
Yeah.
who corroborated the story. So fine, but that's not going to stop the war.
No.
That might be enough to deal with the inner city
Right.
politics, but not
But
the
they already burned the Sargovian district. Like
right.
they already did that level of genocide within the
Well,
city.
and did I miss earlier in the book where it mentioned that the faceless won't take the crystals by force?
Maybe. That didn't seem like it came out of place when it was mentioned at the end.
Okay, because it did to me. So I must have missed it because I thought it was wild that that Mukin just walks out
Yeah.
and doesn't expect to get killed. And again, this is I will admit that now we're, if we haven't already, this is maybe getting into petty territory, but the power level of explicit power level of the characters on the page set against their ineptitude was off the charts.
Yeah.
Why do these people not have guards around them all the time?
Right.
I mean, I feel like the fact that they kept just getting outwitted and outplayed by Lucan and Flea
Mm-hmm.
was, here we go. It made it difficult for me to suspend my disbelief.
Yeah.
Uh,
It
it,
it had the issue that I think a lot of people do, where they don't expect they don't they aren't used to thinking like a security person or someone who is responsible for someone else's well-being the way a security guard or what have you would be, so they don't try to anticipate the their character doing exactly what they're doing. Like the idea that I guess I still had a tiny sliver of hope that James Logan had an ounce of fuck it, I'll be shitty and petty here, an ounce of talent when he went to open the chest and the blade was actually there. It was 100% setting up a fake out, and then
well, but it's for me. You don't even have to go that far. Like how many instances in the book are there where he's facing off against ostensibly older trained
mm-hmm.
professionals and they just don't hear Flea?
Yeah.
That's the story. That's how he that's
How many
that's
did
how he wins in this book, is that they just get outplayed by an 11-year-old girl
and
because I don't know, I guess her feet are magic. And
and let's also consider that he meets Ashra because apparently they were told to empty out the cell she was put in and they just
they
didn't.
just didn't. Yep. They just made an error.
Like I thought that I had missed something when that happened. I was like,
And what, the cell is so dark that they can't, it was just I couldn't do it. I so what, the cell was so dark in one corner that he could be completely out of
how big is
vision.
this cell?
I mean, it must have been pretty good size, I guess. But
I mean, if we were to and I mean this would be a very roomy prison cell, the room we're in down here.
yeah, this is like a 12 by 20.
Right.
Uh,
But I mean, if we were to black out the windows and you were to like
have one torch.
one torch outside the room, I don't think I could hide in that corner.
No. Could you maybe hide against that corner? Like the corner that would
Maybe.
be by the bars? Yeah, but you would think that. Anyway, I just couldn't. I wasn't. That was a big wet fart for
Yeah.
me. And it wasn't that it was one time. It was throughout the whole book. It was, Lucan's about to get fucked, and then, but they didn't hear Flea. And she just pops out and stabs somebody always in the thigh. And I mean, now is as good a time as any we can fight about Flea, because I thought it was, I do not think that was a redeemable character, and I didn't. I thought it was a really lame attempt at the comic relief, and now I know what the true maximum glory of that type of character is, and it's
Yeah.
Grug. It's Grug, baby,
Grub.
Grub,
Yes.
and
Okay. Yeah. I think I was just trying to latch onto something and like
yeah,
the
you were drowning and you were trying to
the
find something to pull your head above the water. I get it.
the scene where they get out of the Twice Crowned King's prison, where they're walking along, he and Asher are walking along, and and he spots Flea, and like she runs up and wraps him in a hug. Like I let out a legitimate awe at that. Like that was a cute scene. You're giving me the look.
I just thought it sucked. I don't know. I just wasn't okay. Again, why is there an 11-year-old kid in this story?
It definitely smacks of, well, there would definitely be 11-year-old street rats, running around pickpocketing. It's like, yeah, but a reasonable person like gives them a few copper and sends them on their way. They don't like, so you want to pickpockets for me?
And I mean, the first trained soldier would have just grabbed her and killed her.
Yeah.
It just now if you give that character some magic or some other quality that means that they are somehow extraordinary, then maybe you can get away with it more. But as far as I could tell, Flea's superpower is her brother died.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not going to do it. That doesn't level you up.
No.
Uh, and she wasn't even that good of a thief. She already failed out and had one finger cut off.
Uh-huh.
And then the first thing that she does in the book is fail to pickpocket Lucan.
Right.
But then from there on out, she is
it's the
master level, god tier, absolute shadow in the mist.
yeah.
I just couldn't buy it.
Somehow is able to climb onto a carriage that's going into the city or going into the palace
with gloves that were moose.
Yeah.
Yeah, at that point it was close enough to the end. I was like, okay, we're just fucking.
I was in full. Okay.
This car's on fire. We're just trying to get to the wall to crash into it.
I'm just rubber stamping through this.
Yep. Yep. Just next page. Yeah. How does that shit work? I
mean,
sticky gloves? Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, that's one of those things where it just. I was sure. Because, I mean, come on, it's 2024. We've all seen the Mythbusters episode where they tried to bust infiltration myths and whatnot. And, like, the issue is not sticking to a surface. The issue is having a device that you can easily stick and unstick.
Right.
That allows you to climb, because the problem is that, like,
and nobody heard her smashing around on top of the cart, on top of the wagon, whatever, the chariot, the whatever.
Yeah.
Because again, she is the shadow in the mist. No one can hear her. Outrageous.
And the little servant boy was so enthralled with the cat that she was able to sneak up behind him and, like. Yeah, I don't know. Flea, I think Flea was an acceptable character because she didn't have a superlative title. They kind of jokingly called her the best street rat in Sophrona, but, like, she wasn't Lady Midnight with the best thief in town. She wasn't the Scrivener with the best forger in town. She was just...
I guarantee you in book 2, if they return to Sophrona, there's legends of Flea.
Absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. That little boy.
Are you Flea? Tell me your whole story. Okay, yeah. I will. And then he does.
Yeah.
And I mean, tell you what, one thing that cannot be said, James Logan is a storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
He will tell you a story. And maybe that's what's going on is it does kind of read like a book written by somebody who either has dementia or he's really afraid that you do. And he's going to make sure that you haven't forgotten the tidbits of story from the beginning of the book.
If you really want, like clearly the blood on cherry blossoms, that was supposed to be this recurring motif.
Yeah, so blood on cherry blossoms, the blade itself, so on and so forth.
So like you mentioned that like once or twice an act, right? If it's really important to like the overall plot. Or if it's this...
I think you can pepper references, as much as you want within reason.
Right.
That's a different thing from paragraph and larger length retellings of the same information over and over again.
Yeah, it just seemed like sometimes he would, like, take a shit and look at it and be like, oh, this reminds me of the blood on the cherry blossoms. Like that kind of was the impression I got sometimes. It was just like,
okay, yeah,
the serving one should bring in his pancakes and be like, this reminds me of the blood on the cherry blossoms.
Well, to go back to the Way of Kings. The problem there was that it was an 1,100-page book where many of the events that were happening seemed like they could have been cut for our taste. But there was the problem with was it
Dalamar, I think. Yeah.
Dalinor, something like that. He would have these visions where he would see the vision, then he would recount the vision in his own mind, and then he would tell somebody about it. But that only happened like 3 or 4 times in that whole book.
Right.
The problem here, so that was an eleven
Well,
hundred
to be
page
fair, it
book.
was twice as long as this book. So if this book had been 1,100 pages long, maybe. No, I got nothing. This is ridiculous.
No, this was a 200 page book, I think 250. It's at least twice as long because of the fluff, the retellings, and whatever else. It very much to
Right.
me felt like, I mean, I can't say this with any kind of certainty, but if I had to just make a random, if I had to theorize, I would say that it was a very short novel, and maybe Tor liked the story and he got a contract and then had to blow it up another 150, 200 pages.
Yeah.
And this was the result.
Yeah, because I think there might be well, no, I was just gonna say there might be a decent tight, if you remove a lot of the fluff.
Well, that would have removed my biggest criticism.
Right.
I still wouldn't have liked the book, I don't think.
But at least it would have been over quickly.
Right. In this
Yeah.
case, it was over long, and it did contain just so much of that.
Yeah.
And again, if you have trouble remembering shit, he holds your hand. He makes sure that you know what the background is.
Mm-hmm.
And so, does it fuck?
No.
No.
Not for Lucan's lack of claiming to try, but
And it was very crude in its language, except for just a couple really random vulgarities
yeah.
that seemed to come out of nowhere. And in fact, I do think that I highlighted one of them. Of course you didn't, Fiero sneered. The most dangerous weapon you've ever held is your limp cock.
Uh-huh.
And that was just random. It just came out of nowhere.
There was another one early on that I can't remember.
And here, I'll give you this one. This was, in my opinion, the best Lee interaction. You're too smart for your own good, kid. Yeah, well, you're too stupid for yours. Okay. That was a chuckle worthy. And there were lots of moments where a platitude was expressed, and I feel like they were trying to be deep and poetic about it, but it was just flat. It's easy to wish death on someone, Lucan said softly, but much harder to actually deliver it to them. Okay, try harder.
That was so much better when Gandalf said it as what was it? Many who die deserve life, many who live deserve death.
Yeah, I don't remember the exact lines that Gandalf uses, but he has many. And again, it's not fair to compare every debut author with like the grandmaster of the genre. So I'm not saying that every quote has to be Gandalf level, but there were just moments where you could tell based on the syntax and the location of the quote and everything having to do with the scene that he was trying to impart some kind of a deep wisdom with a line, and it just didn't have it. And what about the magic system?
You mean the artifacts that some people can dig up? And well, no, there's gleamers
gleamers that appear to be wizards, basically.
Yeah, some sort of duo setup. I think they went into it a little bit. Like one is needed to like channel the power, and the other one to focus it, or some bullshit.
There was some mention of that. I thought that generally the sorcery that happens in the book was pretty good. You had a whip kind of thing going on.
Yeah, the spectral wolf.
That was kind of cool. The foreign, whatever they were, artifacts, I thought were mostly pretty neat. The pyramid game was a cool set piece.
Yeah.
But I mean, that was at the very beginning of the text.
It is something that I think would be a fun thing to do because, obviously there can be some psychological trauma from experiencing, feeling like a bug is crawling out of your skin or that you're freezing solid or like obviously there's some, but ultimately there's no real physical harm. I definitely can see something like that being popular, like in Vegas.
Okay, yeah.
I definitely think there would people be like, yeah, I'll pay $10,000 to win 1 million or 1 billion or whatever. And
Right. Well, and the faceless were suitably overpowered
yeah,
and, quasi god
yeah,
tier beings. And the magic that they did, I thought was generally pretty cool. I would have liked to have seen more sorcery or had a main character that could do some
mm-hmm,
magic or get more about that because I thought it was the most interesting system out of the
yeah,
ones that were available. And the organization of the city itself, while very paint by number, as we've said, I thought there was more that could have been done with the even hand and the Inquisition and all of that. I thought more of the inner workings of that could
yeah,
have been interesting. Some interplay there, some political intrigue. But I mean, definitely the magic system for me was the highlight
right.
of the experience.
Yeah, he set James, the author, set up this really neat prospect of just like you've got someone who's basically got the balls and charisma to try, so we're told, to try to pull off different disguises. Walking into the lion's den as some low level inquisitor like that. Like, I mean, that legitimately takes some balls to do that, to risk that. So they set up this really interesting thing where like she could create the the disguise and the legitimizing paperwork for him to get where he needed to go. And so you would have this kind of she'd be a pseudo fixer or what have you as part of the the team, the squad, the A team, whatever you want to call it. But like pretty much right away, he just kind of pisses her off, and uh, by about the middle of the book, she's like, "I'm not sure why I should even be talking to you."
Is that the accent that
Uh
was
huh.
used? Okay, great.
And it's like, yeah, because you've kind of been a complete tool this whole time. And while I do think she might have been a little bit out of pocket, continually blaming him for burning down her house.
Well, and I thought that was another kind of tease. I thought, okay, we're getting somewhere. They're going to have this base of operations. They're going to
Yeah,
start kind of maneuvering in the city, but then that immediately just
yeah,
I don't even think there's not even like one full chapter where they have that building
no,
before they immediately they're assaulted by the jewelry guys, the
yeah,
topaz and sapphire
yeah. The
and so
seven
on.
jewels.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, we didn't like it. So worse than Knight Errant?
no, because I feel like the author's politics were better than the knight errant's. Like he's a competent author, but he the authors of Knight Errant were more competent technical writers. But like I feel there's a lot of words used about the way the power abuses its or the way powerful people abuse their power and that kind of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I think politically we probably align with a lot of the views
Yeah,
that James Logan has, whereas we disagree with almost
yeah.
all of them from the duo that wrote Knight Errant.
But I think Knight Errant was probably a more enjoyable read.
Yeah, shorter, more fun,
Yeah,
and I mean, even despite the incredulity that we had with some of the things that happened in that book, I think it was more believable
yeah.
than this story. And so this brings us to the end of what we're sort of bracketing off as season one of the podcast. We might come back and do a ranking video for all the books that we've read and talk a little bit about the process of actually making this podcast as an episode. And then we had floated the idea of both of us bringing in our favorite novels of all time and covering those. For me, that would be Nine Princes in Amber by Roger Zelazny, and for you that would be
American Gods by Neil Gaiman.
yeah. And so we may bring that to you, and if not, then we will have some duration of a break over the Christmas ish time, and then we hope to be back with more books to hopefully enjoy in the future. So we hope to see you then. Hey, thanks for listening. You can follow us on Twitter at Staff Trenchcoat. Look for us on Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Feel free to shoot us an email at staffandtrenchcoat@gmail.com if you have a book recommendation, and we hope to see you in the next episode.